Hey guys, it's Dude. I'm here with Misaki, and welcome to Witch on the Holy Night. So this will be our final Type Moon visual novel, for the foreseeable future anyway. Maybe we could come back to Tsukihime remake in a couple years, but not right now. Anyway, before we started, I actually wanted to talk about some things about this game because it holds a special place in the Type Moon universe. So this was actually originally written as a book way back in 1996, which makes it older than Fate's Day Night, Tsukihime, Notes, even Garden of Sinners. It's pretty much the first thing that was ever written for the universe. Apparently, Natsu tried to get it published, but it was too long, so it kind of just sat on the shelf for like 16 years before this visual novel finally came out. As for where it fits in the timeline, it's actually simultaneously a prequel to Tsukihime and Stay Night, Fate Stay Night. So it avoids talking about the mutually exclusive concepts of the two worlds, so these events are able to happen in both of them. I should point out it's specifically a prequel to the Tsukihime remake, not the original universe. We can assume events similar to these happened in the original universe, but at a different time and place, because this one directly contradicts the original. Aoko's house is geographically in the same spot as the Tono mansion. By the way, the game is currently out on Switch and PS4, and it's getting a Steam release in December, which is pretty cool. Now, Misaki, as for narrating this game, it's pretty much entirely third person, so we're gonna have to pick who narrates depending on the scene.
Okay.
So since I have played it before, I think my thought is I'll narrate anytime Alco or Alice is the focus, and then you narrate when anyone else is the focus. That should give us roughly the same amount of speaking time.
But let me know, when those people pop up unless it shows their name.
Well, yeah, it's not always immediately apparent, but yeah, I'll let you know when the scene changes perspectives to a different to like another character besides those two.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, also, this game is completely linear. There are no choices. I don't have to keep a track of a flowchart or anything.
Okay, nice, because some of those flowcharts are so messy.
Yeah. Also, there's no H content in this game, so I don't need a center screen for once.
Yay, no jump
Yeah.
scares.
Although sadly, that means Aoko's the only girl who never got any action from Tsukihime.
Sensei's built different.
All right, so let's get started. I gotta use my alt account here because my main one's got a completed save file. So, Witch on the Holy Night. It was a winter's day 8 years prior when it happened. That solemn morning where she understood the value of her life for the very first time. Her home was nestled in the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but an inhospitable wilderness. She had no neighbors or childhood friends to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more troubled than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories, both frustrating and halcyon. It was only during summer, though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. Her father would drive her to the train station, after waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up and the iced over windows to clear. Oops, I forgot to turn the voices off. uh, wait, oops, nope, wrong button. Oh boy, I'm sorry, this game has weird, like, menu buttons. There we go.
I love the picture book art style.
Oh yeah, the whole game's not like that, though. Like, this is just because it's a flashback, but, yeah, it does look nice. Like, this game as a whole is really beautiful. Um, wait, voice settings. Um, Voice volume. Here we go. Anything else I need to change here? I think we're good. Okay. Mind starting the car for me? Her father would save her his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with icy breath, until she reached that old sedan. As always, she inserted the key and started the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. Just as she proudly finished that humble task she'd done so many times before. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car. Creaking fan belts, a monstrous-looking engine, and something that didn't belong. There was a cat, mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. The 3 cats had been huddling for warmth in the engine's compartment. The mother cat was missing its head. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts and surely died instantly. The other kitten, its face half covered in blood, panted faintly. It desperately clung to its mother, or rather, the chunk of meat that was its mother, with the last bit of life it could muster. Poor things. Her father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. They had slept next to the engine and awoken to a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of. It's okay. It wasn't your fault. Her father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's gray fur. The rest of it was caked in the blood of its mother and brother. I think that's Aoko saying that.
I can see its skull.
The fragile life of a speckled kitten. Trembling and possibly blind, it continued to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest. Wait. She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. Fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew that magic was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales, but so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help. I suppose you want me to alter this kitten's fate. Cave-dwelling magician said indifferently.
This kitten needs our help.
She pleaded. Whether it was a simple task or a Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the child's wish, like a machine.
Oh no.
The girl said. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left its body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her chest like an endless gray sky. We were too late. Some things cannot be undone. Her mind struggling to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Who she met, what she had known, it was all as if it never happened. The only thing she was sure of was that life, once extinguished, could never return.
Is somebody there?
That day, it was her mistake that gave birth to me. Indeed, whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is a fairy tale of 8 years ago. The day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. Arrogant, greedy, and able only to destroy. Wait, I think that's her talking now.
Arrogant, greedy, and only able to destroy. I must be a wolf. I don't have any regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood.
Chapter 1, Strange One. Oh. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was an ashen watercolor gray. The thermometer displays 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. Her stomach woke up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today's were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning. On an ordinary weekday, tardiness would be unavoidable, but today, classes were canceled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside, the windows were a gloomy gray, and it reminded her more of evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination. But having been up all night just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was of no concern to her. She shuts the curtains. Then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
I'd like a nice uneventful dream for 2 hours. Thank you.
Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple requests would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingers in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, out of habit, her eyes popped open.
Oh, come on. Why'd you have all days?
The telephone was situated in the foyer of the first floor. Answering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In her sleep-deprived state, the distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge.
Why doesn't Alice answer it?
She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. The realization struck that her housemate did not have the day off from school and was likely in class at her prestigious little hilltop academy. The caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ringing even louder.
I'm trying to sleep here.
She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room.
God, it's cold.
She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so on a dreary morning as this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by a dense forest. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated through the long hallway. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house.
Well, it is a haunted house, I suppose. It's too large for just the two of us.
She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible. Though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale. For whether it be objectively true or merely supposition, it is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion.
The one that's adjusting their bow, is that Alice?
That is actually Aoko.
Oh, it's Aoko.
Yep. And you might be wondering where her red hair is, but yeah, this is much earlier in her life, so...
But man, about that cat and the engine thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that's not like a thing that usually happens. I've only ever seen that once happen in real life.
But you've actually seen it happen before? Jeez.
Yeah, when I was at a sleepover, which is the worst part.
Ooh.
So I was just like awkwardly like, oh gosh, like I don't know what to say. Like rest in peace, kitty.
Wow. Oh my god, this opening is just so beautiful. I believe this game is getting a movie adaptation at some point in the future, so can't wait to see what that looks like.
Oh, nice. Welcome home, Misaki. We're back in Misaki town. Oh yeah, best town.
The rain had subsided somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared up by early afternoon.
Not that it has anything to do with me, though.
The weather reflected her luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain.
I'm getting a bad feeling about this.
The sinking feeling she had only grew. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. She didn't encounter any other students along the way, nor did she see any taking part in club activities either. The reception desk in the faculty room simply read "faculty closed." The school had given all of the students a day off, except those explicitly summoned, like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed towards the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Slim-framed glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image this mid-twenties man presented clashed with the cigarette he smoked. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet.
Mr. Yamashiro?
By the way, this game's localization is a bit weird. Like, it doesn't use Hepburn romanization, even though these are Japanese names. This one of the other
Yeah,
main
I know it
characters.
should be Yamashiro, not Sito.
Yeah. She closed the door with a bang. Showing no response to the sudden sound, Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head. Hey there. Good morning, Ms. Aozaki. I guess this means you got the call.
Yes, they called me at home about an hour ago, out of the blue.
Having graduated from this high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro was not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, the students preferred him over the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about and kept the conversation casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness for him. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere, like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measure, not a buddy to joke and pal around with. It was the exact opposite of how she felt a teacher should be. It was only natural that her manner towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Not that she'd ever been wired to make friendly small talk. You're in a foul mood today.
Today, I'm like this every day.
The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. Her bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying up late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial. If you say so, just go easy on our guest, okay? To be honest, we're not completely sure how to deal with him yet.
About that, do you want to tell me what the hell's going on? Because I have no clue.
As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone and slowly put out his cigarette. Let's start at the beginning. What did they tell you over the phone?
Just that I'd be introduced to a transfer student. They were a little hazy on the rest, though.
One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry, not because she had been called to school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically. If this was all... Oh, wait, no, yeah.
If this was all a joke to you, perhaps I should just go home.
By the way, I love how they actually put the characters in the scene. Like, it's not just them sitting in front of a background.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it feel more alive. Wait, I didn't mean to laugh. This is not a practical joke. We could really use your help.
So there really is a transfer student?
Yes, but he has, how should I put it, difficult circumstances. His name is Sojiro, and he's a bit, well, peculiar. So we thought someone around the same age would be best suited to show him the ropes. She threw him an unamused look. It was negligent of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe he meant the student had behavioral problems or was just difficult somehow. But peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
You don't hear a teacher call someone that every day.
She had her doubts, but swept them aside for now. This wasn't the time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remained that this conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and that she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home.
I have a question.
Yes, the second-year student like you. He's well-behaved and a good listener. He's not the most energetic individual, but that just means he'll be easier to get along with, right? He's not in the same homeroom class as you, but I'm sure you'll get along just...
I'll be the judge of that when I actually meet him. And none of that answered my question. Why me?
Because you're the protagonist. Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times, that strength shattered expectation, and on those occasions they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster and weather it until it passed. That was how Mr. Yamashiro had come to deal with her as over the past year.
I'll ask you one more time, Mr. Yamashiro. Why does it have to be me?
Pressured by a question without a clear yes or no answer, he answered. Well, about that. You're probably thinking it's because you're the iron-fisted ruler of the student council and are willing to strike down both teacher and student for the good of the school, but you're wrong.
I can't imagine any other reason you'd call me.
Her eyes did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strengths far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro let slip a genuine smile, admiring the miraculous balance of quiet qualities. I mean, I'd handle this myself if it was just about pure obligation. Oh, wait.
I'd handle this myself if it was just about pure obligation, but who gets this job has nothing to do with whether they're a teacher or on the student council. I just felt that you were the only one who would...
Oh, that is him. Dang it. Even in this game. It just felt that you were the only one who would entertain this kind of a request without needing to weigh all sides. That's why I insisted it be you. In other words, he knew she wouldn't say no.
Mr. Yamashiro?
Oh dear. Would you stop glaring at me like that already? At least put on a smile for your new schoolmate. Look, if you're agreeing to help, we should go see him. We've already kept him waiting long enough as it is. And because you braved the rain to get here, I'd be happy to give you a ride home. Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully.
I'm good, thanks.
She replied, before turning and walking out of the faculty room. He had been waiting for about an hour. While he did, the rain shower lightened into a drizzle. His mind, his mind wandered as he listened to the. Oh, I think this is actually our male lead. So you narrate this part.
Okay, I feel so bad for him waiting an hour.
Yeah.
His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best behaved student might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now, but the boy stuck in his spot like a scarecrow. He was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November, and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. The room was not much warmer. The heater hadn't been turned on. Either he'd missed the teacher telling him to turn it on, or he'd never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him it was a drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an arid cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. So even this world, alien as it was, could have something in common with the mountains. That trivial detail perked him up a little. He liked how the town looked soaked in rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked the rain in its own way. The fog from the rain had soaked up the scent of the soil, and it reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety that the city gave him. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He'd already been here 2 weeks, and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps the feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. He quietly endured the numbing cold and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his or not, he was astonishingly patient. It was certainly helping him out in this moment. 1 hour in the cold with nothing to do. Like, at least read a book, dude. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of the transfer student had been explained to her on the way to the meeting room.
I think
She was
we've
told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity.
I think we've switched
Oh,
perspective again. But yeah, I didn't think about how
without
to
any
hit.
electricity, though.
Oh yeah, yeah. And on top of that, this is the '80s, so even then, even here, like, their technology is pretty primitive.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I didn't think about how to handle scenes where these two are together. I think Aoko talks more, so I'll narrate when they're together.
Okay.
Yeah, she was told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of civilized society would have been an utter mystery to him.
What a miserable level of isolation. How's this even possible in post-war Japan? He's like Robinson Crusoe.
I don't know who that is, but
Same.
she had every right to be angry. His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with the village is in the foothills of the mountains. It only occurred once in a month or so, which was unfathomable in modern Japan. Okay, I think we've switched again. Like, it's not going to switch back and forth this often all the time, but for this establishing scene,
Although the expressways in Japan Rail, the old national railways, now span the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for mountain villages like his to exist. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live.
okay.
When you say no electricity, you mean in general, right? Like, he must have had access to a public phone.
Apparently not. He mentioned how shocked he was by the phones when he started living here. I kid you not, he said, "Wow, telephones are so unusual. Couldn't really deny that, could I?" She shot a sidelong glare at his way as he laughed. It seemed that the naivete of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yasuhiro a bit. Yeah, yeah. They probably didn't have police officers either. My family. That's Aoko, I think.
They probably didn't have police officers either. My family home is up in the mountains, so it's not inconceivable that they wouldn't have electricity. But he doesn't even know what school is?
Nope.
The heck?
Yep. this is... He'd heard of them, but this is apparently his first time visiting one. Maybe that's why he's nervous. He wasn't very talkative. He's almost what you would call feral, like a boy raised by wolves. I suppose that makes us Lewis and Clark. Hey, you're scaring me, Aozaki. I was joking. Go easy, okay? And don't worry, I got the feeling from talking to him that he's a nice kid. It was almost like, I don't know, a cute little animal that doesn't speak human.
Your jokes and metaphors aren't helping.
As she gives her blunt reply, she tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like, but the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She too wanted to give up and return to her warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back and on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallway, the rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle. Aozaki? I believe in you and all, but I'll say it again. Be nice, okay? Can you at least try to smile?
I'm bad at faking smiles, but I'll do my best.
Really? That's a relief. I really mean it. It's good to know you're not good at everything. Mr. Yamashiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand on the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
I already know I'm not the friendliest looking person in the world, but I can't just make myself smile at the drop of a hat. You should have asked Tobimaru if that's what you're after.
She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep deprived wasn't anything to smile about. She also thought the person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. It might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all this on a normal school day. Another complaint she wanted to voice later.
I hate him already. He's my sworn enemy, and I haven't even met him. Sorry, but I couldn't care less about his extenuating circumstances. You think this isn't awkward for me too? Honestly, why did this have to happen when I'm so busy?
Her pounding headache from a lack of sleep and had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. Just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities. Just looking straight ahead and She just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room. And found herself face to face with a most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see it from another perspective. Turning back the clock just a little. I think that's just speaking in general, like narration.
You don't have to do anything. For some, these words are a priceless luxury. For others, they are unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she'd be too suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick, though at this very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the gray sky. He had already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had their reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
It must be 9 o'clock already. Yeah, that seems about right.
He had been vaguely keeping track of the time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the patter of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then he heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching.
Finally, I thought they'd forgotten about me.
He could hear two sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
So sorry to keep you waiting.
The first person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamashiro, the one who brought
Is Mr.
the one who
Yamashiro the
brought
one
me
who brought me
here.
here? Hey, where's Mr. Satonaka? I told him to keep you company. He shouldn't have left you here.
Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear that she didn't want to be there, a dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. Sojiro gulped. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. That was how it felt when time stood still. I half expected it to turn to, and that was how I met your mother.
She blinked quickly a few times as if taken aback. Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. His eyes went... Oh.
His eyes widened slightly as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feelings into words was a different matter altogether. So we will never know exactly what he experienced at that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny.
Allow me to introduce the two of you. This is the transfer student I mentioned, Sojiro Shizuki. I hate that spelling so much.
Same.
And this is the girl that will be showing you around. She's our student council president and came in on her day off just to welcome you. Her name is Aoko Aozaki. His voice and the sound. Yep.
Or whose point of view is it from?
Yeah, well, this is where they get into that weird mix. So unless it's obviously talking from Sojiro's perspective, I'll narrate. His voice and the sounds of the rain seem distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse, like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks. It was commonly believed among the students that Aoko was always in a foul mood. This gossip was 90% prejudice, and Aoko simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time. And therefore she seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip, however, did lead her earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Aoko herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Today fell under that 10%. For today, her anger was pure, and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. This was the setting of the three of them found themselves in. First impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wildflowers. In spite of her perfect posture, he seemed subdued and frail. His perfect posture. Yeah. And although describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least he was passive. Even through his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly forgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him more a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Aoko's reasonless reaction? He seemed almost too at home in the meeting room, and she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, who were the guests here. She felt an unidentified aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Aoko felt herself raising her natural defenses.
What's with me? Am I really this angry for no reason?
She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. It pained her less than you would imagine for a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged her like a thorn in her side. Aozaki, why don't you introduce yourself? Mr. Yamashiro's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating.
Introduce myself, huh?
After casting a nasty glance in the teacher's direction, Aoko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, it might have looked like a stare down. And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurtled toward the innocent boy and skewered him. Again, sorry for the wait, Shizuki. Switching again.
Hearing his name, Sojiro came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking it up to nerves, Mr. Yamashiro broke out a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him.
I'll do the introductions then. This is the transfer student, Sojiro Shizuki. And this is our student council president who came in on her day off just to show you around. Her name was Aoko Aozaki.
Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless, her stare an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Sojiro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. He had never been greeted quite like this before, but supposed, mistakenly, that this was how people treat each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. The girl ready to brawl. An earnest country boy desperate to understand. It was a murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. While he had thought that he had made the right decision in choosing an honor student to help him out, she was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was at this moment that he realized his failure. His realization had come far too late. One false move and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would becoming a storm that would rock the very foundations of the school. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune or disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued.
Wow, you two really seem to have hit it off. I suppose I can leave you two to it then.
Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept towards the door.
I'll be in the faculty room. Stop by when you're finished. You'll be alright, won't you, Ozaki? You're the student council president. Don't let me down.
Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, one in which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was a naive boy and a cross-armed guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players agonizing over the first moves, though ultimately, it was only Aoko that had considered the scene that carefully. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Sojiro.
I think we'll switch over again.
Whatever, it's not like this is the first time that Mr. Yamashiro landed me in it. So, what's your name again?
Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Incapable of such venom himself. I'm Sojiro Shizuki, he replied. And you're Miss Aozaki, right? For whatever reason, he came across as happy in his response.
Drop the miss, that's not my style. Is Shizuki fine?
It's Shizuki.
Oh gosh, no.
What do you mean?
What do you mean, what do I mean?
First line is hers.
Hello? Did I say something weird?
Yeah, very. The boy replied immediately as if it was a natural response, but quickly second-guessed himself. Never mind. That must be normal here. You can call me Shizuki. Do you mind if I call you Aozaki?
Suit yourself.
She followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand, it had been entrusted to her, and it was her personal policy to see it through to the end.
Sorry, but I'm not in the mood for pleasantries. Time is short, so let's get this over with.
Sure, I know your time is valuable. Aoko's blunt rancor was lost on him once again. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing none of her attacks, Aoko did her best to act professional and directed her guests into the hallway. There was no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. This was more like a prison than the cave that was a meeting room. As it dawned on Aoko that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once again.
First things first, did you understand everything Mr. Yamashiro explained to you?
Yes, I get how the school works, but it's still a bit hard to imagine that everyone here is around the same age.
I see. Great.
Aoko rubbed her forehead. This Sojiro kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently all he'd heard about school was that it was a place where a lot of people met to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge in various fields of study, while fostering discipline and creativity. But never did Aoko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yet fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro had managed to pass the transfer exam after all, barely.
Not my problem.
Aoko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she'd spend with this boy out of time, or at least she tried to keep it that way. Aozaki? He asked, calmly trying to get her attention.
What?
Can I ask you something?
Yes, what is it?
I could be wrong about this, but you seem upset about something. You're not a morning person, are you? His gaze revealed earnest concern, as if asking if she'd remembered to eat breakfast.
That face.
Yeah. It was like another hammer to her head. It was true that Aoko had been glaring at Sojiro the entire time. Glaring her red-hot daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark... No, that's Alice.
Most people can't handle your scowl, Aoko.
She's a more stoic type.
Okay, most people can't handle your scowl, Aoko.
Also, I don't know if she could handle this, but I think it would fit if she had a British accent. Do you think you could do that, or is that too much?
Nope.
Okay.
It wouldn't hurt you to be a little more tolerant.
She'd been warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a powder keg. How naive could the boy be that he could not pick up on this?
He's not making fun of me, is he? No, he couldn't be.
Hmm?
Hmm?
Even she found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Aoko far too late. That compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well have been from another planet.
Look, let me spell it out for you. Because you're just not getting it. It's not your imagination. I'm angry and anyone could see that in my eyes. It's easier than trying to make conversation.
In response to her words, the Martian claps his hands together. That makes sense. I don't know why you'd want to do it that way, but I get that it's a faster way to express yourself. Sojiro accepted her reasoning without argument, though he still had no idea what kind of emotions she was trying to express. As if she could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. The ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks.
So it's true, he really is peculiar.
Mr. Yamashiro's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy was way beyond naivety. A stranger in a strange land he may be, but it was only civilized to forgive him some jet lag-induced confusion.
Let's visit your classroom.
She had regained her composure. Sojiro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks. Just one more thing. Aoko waited for Sojiro to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness. I wanted to ask you, why are you so angry? Is it your line of business, or does it run in your family? A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated this thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check.
It's not you. It's what you're worried about. I'd just rather be somewhere else right now.
With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this rude stranger named Sojiro Shizuki. While what constitutes normal is clearly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with modest features. If he was an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. And Sojiro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in ordinary fashion. The way her fingers raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across hallways and classrooms. I think we're back to narrating for him, so...
The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off her. Aoko showed him to his homeroom, Class C, of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Sojiro was none the wiser as to its function. Aoko gave him a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms, as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Sojiro asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor.
Oh dear.
Sojiro stopped, looking genuinely concerned.
It's 20 to 1 already.
Huh? You're kidding, right? This school isn't that big. We'll be done soon. The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of a school shouldn't take anywhere near this long. Maybe if you didn't ask so many questions, we'd be done by now. It's a miracle it's still light out. Aoko glared at Sojiro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well that he would never pick up on it. Is he... To her surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his dejection. Oops, I think I broke him. The guy before her now was nothing like earlier.
I think we switched again. Again, like once this scene ends, it'll be more obvious like what perspective to narrate from. But this particular one, just because they're together for a good chunk of it. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily, at least, until her irritation returned in full force.
What's the hurry? Don't tell me your brain's not big enough to remember all this stuff.
Well, there's that, but it's more about it almost being 1 o'clock. Sojiro's gaze wandered as if worried about something. He was worried about the weather. He would have a hard time seeing it as there were no windows in this hallway.
Don't tell me. You've got somewhere better to be. Perfect. I take time out of my day for you, and you don't have the decency to even hang around. You're a real piece of work, you know that?
Thanks, I guess. That's nice of you to say.
Not a compliment.
She yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury.
Well?
Well, what?
Happening in 20 minutes.
Sojiro's face lit up as he finally understood what she was asking him. It's a secret. He said with a perfectly straight face.
Every time I think I've got this guy figured out, he finds a way to trip me up.
Her frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings and fake a smile.
You want to repeat that, Shizuki?
She took a step forward. Like I said, it's a secret. Feeling the mood change drastically, Sojiro took a step back. And another, and another. No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging toward him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
Last question. Do you enjoy mocking me?
He had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted presenting any evidence to prove this would do much to erase that forced smile on her face. Let me explain. His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that uneasy smile. The truth is that my part-time job shift starts at 1, but students aren't allowed to have jobs, right?
Yeah. Wait, were you being tight-lipped because you thought you'd get in trouble? All you have to do is get permission, dweeb.
I know, I did. I got permission when they accepted me to the school.
Really?
Ako's face lit up as she realized she might not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yet. But I only got permission for one of my jobs.
Wait, you have more than one job?
Well, I quit 2 of them.
Sheesh.
Living expenses are bad enough, but now I have to earn money for school as well. Don't you think it's unreasonable for them to only let me work one job?
No, I think you're the one who's being unreasonable.
Though still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own. She could also empathize with him having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The words part-time job were about the last thing she ever expected to hear out of this country boy's mouth.
Well, you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. It's fine, you can go, I get it.
Will you be okay? She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate, which also took her by surprise. She figured he'd just be as dense about people's feelings as he was about everything else.
I'll be fine. I'll just head home.
First, though, she thought it best that they stop by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to sign off on her duties.
I finished showing him around.
Great job. That goes for you too, Shizuki. What'd you think of our school? Thank you for the tour. It's like a real school. Haha, that's great to hear. Okay then, best of luck starting tomorrow. She had no interest whatsoever in this pointless wrap-up meeting.
Well, you'll have to forgive Mr. Yamashiro. He likes the faculty room so much he chooses to kick back there, while getting his students to do his dirty work for him. I bet he spends hours in there. Actually, that's pretty smart of him.
Okay, Ozaki. If you're fine with it, then so am I.
Huh?
There it was again. Whatever Sojiro was getting at, Aoko had no idea. I'm gonna get going. Thanks again for today.
Yes, today. Today only.
She shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile as if he found the gesture endearing. It was a softer expression than she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was a kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Aozaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile. See you later.
Huh?
And with that friendly farewell, Sojiro walked toward the end of the hallway. Or so she thought before he turned into the next class over.
Did he just...
Sojiro headed straight for one of the classroom's windows. Whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sounds of rain doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized his intention with opening the window. She really wished she hadn't.
No, stop, stop, stop.
He already had one leg out the window when she dashed to stop him.
What are you doing?
What am I doing? I'm leaving for my job. That's what.
You do know what... You do know that this window isn't an exit, don't you? I mean, do you even know what floor you're on?
She saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes. Oh my god, I almost died. Who would put an exit here? This is dangerous.
What? I don't know how to feel about this, dude. It's the lack of something between your eyes that's dangerous.
Ears.
Or your ears that's dangerous.
Her insult went right over his head.
People here don't normally enter and exit through the windows, okay? You should probably remember this information for future reference.
Oh, I know. I just wanted to save some time. But thanks. I'll be more careful from now on. I love just the blank smile on his face. He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. His school uniform was soaked wet from the rain.
Hey, be my guest. Go outside any way you like, just don't do it in front of me from now on. Anyway, you start school tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous though, which is why I came in early for the tour. He bid her farewell before running away down the hallway. She hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
Ah, I wonder if he's really going to be okay here.
The image of him disappearing into the distance popped into her head in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place? A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been a more enjoyable day than the irritating experience she just had.
Whatever. It's not as if I'll see him again. But you will.
The sound of rain echoed quietly all around her. The gray sky seemed frozen in time. It was impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoko were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoko stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty, unremarkable watch showed that it was almost 1 o'clock.
He was right about the time.
She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she might have seen before, but for whatever reason, affected her far more than she wished. Aku did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would be ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day just as he had hers. She walked as quietly as she could toward the entrance and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. The distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
Well, I suppose it could be worse.
She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked rain, but found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. Teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Aoko instead of a ghost. It was with that umbrella that she made her way towards Misaki Station. The private Misaki High School got its name from the town of the same name. The area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to unprecedented modernization. There were some who fought to preserve Misaki's natural treasures.
I agree in principle to preserving the land, but not at the expense of our prosperity.
Oh, that's the mayor. With those words, the mayor snuffed out the voices of minority and ushered in a long-term plan for new urban development. More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of Misaki City in merely 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of the neighboring Yashirogi, or the elegance of Misaki Hills.
What did people expect, to keep the town hidden atop the mountain forever? It's not like they were gonna flatten the mountains or something.
Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years prior. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where the citizens could not. It became a truly odd suburban town, welcoming an increasingly urban population with its vestiges of old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds was remote, steep, and also well trodden by animals. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed for the construction of a new campus in the city. And thus, Misaki High School reopened its doors, the old woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hardy rustic people of this country town preferred prefectural schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. All she had wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she had hoped to spend her days enjoying live music on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed when with her sister's departure. So here she was, walking alone in town with only a red umbrella to keep her company, what should have been a day off.
Looking back on it now, it's like my whole life has been one disaster after another.
Her frustration evaporated into the cold December air.
Oh well, at least it's not boring.
With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in her wake. The busier part of town met her at the bottom of the gently sloping road. Hey, actual people.
Amazing.
Misaki's train station was brand new. One looking no prettier than an abandoned once looking no prettier than an abandoned factory. It had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on the east and west sides. The department stores first opened. Aoko and her friends had become impressed with their modern feel, but in time, the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at a cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommates would never let her hear the end of it if she frittered away her money. She looked back and blinked. For just a moment, she could have sworn she'd seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye.
Heh.
It must have been her imagination. The sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued to walk home, brushing off the event as if it had never happened. In time, the chill faded, and all that was left was the sound of the town.
Ugh.
She sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had all been in her head, she was far from comfortable with the feeling that still lingered.
Even mosquitoes have the grace to buzz off eventually.
She grumbled under her breath.
Whether good or bad, this too shall pass. So the saying goes. Yeah, I've got enough on my plate as it is.
Unfortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. She could see how bugs could be drawn to all the sweet fruit. I think we're over to Sojiro now, so...
Oh, he works. He's a cook.
Well, he works at a restaurant. I don't think he cooks, though.
Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone.
Actually, maybe he does cook. It's been a while. I'm trying to remember the little details, but yeah.
But one last battle remained, dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer.
Do I have to wear this?
His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
I know how you feel, man, but I feel the same. Unfortunately, it's the boss's orders, so you'll have to suck it up, okay? The future of this shopping arcade is at stake, apparently. I really hate to ask, but the rain has stopped, so would you mind going out for me? Get back in one piece and I'll buy you dinner.
His bright orange coworker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with this unreasonable task.
Oh. I guess still
4
you.
years ago, Misaki City was a town of farm and woodland. But everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with tall, multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Shiroi Nuzuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiroi Nuzuka, sitting as it did atop of the hill in the middle of the town, was no exception to that convention and had no residences to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground in development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house.
By the way, I'm going to zoom in here. Oops, wrong button. Like I can actually see the house from here.
Oh, nice, the haunted house.
Oops, okay. Aoko Aozaki traversed a long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Misaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it, but unfortunately, Misaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was one thing that had made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today she had been denied even that.
Ugh. I'd cycle home if it wasn't for this rain. Even a bus route would be a fine thing.
Aoko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey has never gotten easier.
Oh, it's locked? I guess Alice isn't back yet.
With a weary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open as if to welcome her home.
There sits atop that hill a haunted house.
That is how the story, much shared around town, used to begin. But fresh rumors about the house had sprung to life almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gathers atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was one that Aoko wished to discredit the most. The final rumor was an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. Rumors spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in a wood on top of a hill no one dared to approach, like a ruin shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. The house was the Koenji mansion. Everyone in the town knew about the witch's house on the hill, the unabashedly haunted house where Aoko Aozaki resided for reasons unknown. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. The Koenji family home was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history, stretching all the way back to England. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms. It was surrounded by a large all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of the hill was a cause of suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires might be living here. Not on this timeline, anyway.
Yep. Well, I know I'm not one, but Alice.
She put her hand on the front door. It's a grand double door that would have paired well with a brass lock, and yet is secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of gray. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Aoko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up the wall to the secondary floor hall. There was a 3rd floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She never set foot there in the 2 years she had lived here, though. The Koenji mansion was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Aoko had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open the door that would trap you in a storybook world or lead to an attic that can only be used for storage these last 5 years. Aoko's room was at the end of the East Wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room for no other reason other than she thought it would be easier to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That is all she brought with her from her home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She borrowed the next room down for her own purposes.
Oh yeah, I should check on the watchtower I got from Alice.
She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year and how different that life was from the one she lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was a room for the person she would eventually become, place of solitude that she could enter, or so she thought.
Wow, not only did it break, it vanished without a trace. Looks like I've still got a long way to go. Go ahead, laugh it up, Robin.
The nosy neighbor had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Aoko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the first floor. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing into the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered the nearby doorway. That's how you know we're in the 80s. That TV right there.
Life without electricity. I don't even want to imagine it.
It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. It stood looking over the furniture like the emperor with no clothes. That's our second Emperor's New Clothes reference in the past 24 hours.
I know, right?
The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Aoko, it was an essential commodity. They'd fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort.
Guess I want to talk. I came from a pretty traditional household myself.
Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea, then another. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon.
I think the afternoon's over. It's based on that cutscene.
The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, and she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Aoko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body from the cushions. This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached for a teacup, but the tea within it had gone completely cold.
Did I doze off?
She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table.
Yes.
The girl answered without lifting her gaze. When silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Aoko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Aoko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she was frozen in time. The weight of her neck was so lovely that even Aoko found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice Koonji, and she was the same age as Aoko.
How long was I asleep? At least an hour. You'll catch a cold if you keep sleeping here.
Alice answered indifferently, not that bothered by it. Aoko, who was now used to it. Not that it bothered Aoko, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one to her, and she had slept little that night before, so it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had.
You could have woken me up. Now my tea is cold. It was already cold by the time I got here. I'm sure it was, I'm just saying.
Aoko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Koonji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake up.
Nothing quite beats this tea, not even the expensive kind from Britain. Anyway, welcome home, Alice. The universe seems determined to keep me from even the occasional luxury without you. What is it about today? Is it just my luck or what? At this rate, I'm due for a temple visit just to be safe.
Aoko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
Something happened?
After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Aoko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Aoko gave her the details.
I should start by apologizing. The project I was working on all night was a total failure. And even though I only took my eyes off of it for a second, it must have boiled over and been destroyed. They'll add that I shuffled the circulation codes as a precaution.
Aoko tried to laugh it off as if it was someone else's problem.
And? Something came up this morning and I was called into school. They made me show this transfer student around and it took up my whole day. By the time I got back, it had vanished without a trace. You're not mad, are you? Hardly. If I got mad every time you broke something, there would be no end to the fighting. I have more material so you can just start over. However, aren't you really the one who's angry?
First could look at her eyes. Alice was very much on point today. It was true that despite outward appearances, Aoko was seething with frustration. That aside,
True enough. The transfer student I mentioned earlier was a real piece of work. He's been living deep in the mountains and has literally zero common sense. I know people say that the mountains are like an entirely different world, but I had no idea how true it was, Alice.
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name, but Aoko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Aoko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
We didn't get along well from the start, but things really took a turn for the worse when I took him into a classroom. He apparently thought it was a place where you get one-on-one tutoring, and that's not all. I mean, you're never gonna believe this. Do you think he asked when I politely explained what a classroom is to him? And what are the other classrooms for? Unbelievable, right? I mean, a classroom is a classroom. And no matter how vague or unhelpful anything I said was, he just kept nodding. It's like he was just taking everything at face value. I don't know if he just lacks an imagination or never uses it. Anyway, he at least seemed to grasp most of what I told him the first time around, so I suppose he's not a complete idiot. It's rare to see you so judgmental. Is it really worth getting worked up over someone like that? I couldn't care less about him. I'm just worried he'll screw up somehow.
What she was really worried about was having to clean up that mess if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of her head.
Well, he was a weirdo, alright. You two probably would have hit it off great. Another world in the mountains doesn't sound so bad.
But from her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Aoko gave a non-committal response.
Anyway, what have you been reading? A book about spiritual evolution based on the spiritual diary. Ah, Swedenborg, huh? Is that really worth reading again? I wouldn't bother if it were the original, but this is a knockoff. It exaggerates the pros and cons of Swedenborg's style and reads like a well-written adventure. Having the secret organization Kent standing in his way was a nice addition. The handwriting of the notes in the margin belongs to your grandfather, by the way. Huh, I had no idea he was into that sort of thing. He had a great sense of humor. I really miss him.
Aoko seemed nostalgic over her now-deceased grandfather.
He just contacted you this last summer, didn't he? Do we really have to go there? Why can't dead stay dead?
Aoko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
As I was saying...
Alice shot a glance at Aoko. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Aoko had tuned out of the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aoko Aozaki was.
Yeah, what is it?
She asked, lying down.
It's upsetting that you already failed today. Like I said, I'm thinking about it. I need to focus on becoming a full-fledged mage before thinking about school. I know that. I hope you do.
The coldness in her voice made Aoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore from school was different than the way she lived at home. Well, it could be called hiding in plain sight. Aoko thought it was silly. And what silence told her was...
Make up your mind already, I know.
Teddy's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet, that careless mistake was a clear sign of Aoko's lack of commitment.
This doesn't concern Alice. It's my decision to make.
She'd only known for sure for the last year and a half, but she had a hunch for as long as she could remember.
Make the choice, and the day will come.
It was little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Aoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
Okay, Alice, we can do it next week. That work for you? As long as it works for you.
Aoko could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
I'll let you set it up, then. That's still beyond my abilities. Should we do it in that park? Sure. The line there is suitable enough, but then what about the other thing? Isn't that a more urgent concern? It depends on the conditions. I'll let you know if there are any changes to the woods.
After that brief exchange, Alice returned to her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Aoko grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Aoko decided to tune into a variety show that had already started.
Uh,
Alice started to speak, but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Aoko that the sound her cute little roommate made just now was different than the wah she blurted in times past.
What is it?
Aoko turned down the volume on the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat.
It's nothing, really, but... But what?
Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If you could see her at this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
It's just that I saw something strange on my way home and wanted to tell someone about it.
Aoko nodded, beckoning her to continue.
It's silly, really. But I just can't make sense of it no matter how much I think about it. Aoko, do you have any idea why a man-sized cat would be riding around town, delivering meals to people?
For a second, Aoko thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Aoko, the story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempts at jokes. Aoko concluded that her roommate was talking about something that she had actually seen.
There are a few things off about that. Maybe we should break it down. Let's not. Even I can think of a few mundane explanations. I'm just asking because I can't figure out why somebody would do that. Maybe it's as simple as someone just dressing up as a finely crafted catsuit to deliver food for a restaurant. I'm more worried about the person doing it than their reasons personally.
Alice nodded tentatively at her words.
But whatever does it for them, I guess. In a world with nothing like us, and weirdos that live like mountain hermits, there's no telling what kinds of freaks are out there. I personally would have just gone up to them and asked them what they were doing.
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
Hmm.
I
A
think
delivery
that's
cat riding
Aoko.
through neighborhoods in the evening. Sounds like something out of a fantasy story. Hey, what should we do about dinner tonight? Speaking of delivery, maybe we should order in.
Aoko loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. They had no rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner. The two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out, nights like this one were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants of Misaki Town. Delivery to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of their disgruntlement.
It's still before 8, so we're good. I'm really in the mood for kongetsu tonight. I haven't had their tsukumi soba in ages.
The Hungry Student Council president looked. I took. Wait, the Hungry Student Council president took. There are a lot of typos in this game. I didn't. I forgot about this. Took our their many menus and excitedly looked for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing so much as a glance.
Sorry, but I've already had dinner.
With those words, Aoko froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Quill Society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared, "The minimum number of orders shall be 3, starting next year." Aoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fetus change in direction.
Raider, is that why you were getting back late? Is that why you were late getting back? Between the bus ride and the walk, the trip home only takes about 20 minutes. I should have known something was up when you didn't get home before 5 o'clock.
Unfortunately for Aoko, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who'd fallen asleep.
What about Ice Queen? I thought it was clear that if either of us got food, we would bring enough home for the other person. Didn't I bring back something for you when I ate out last time?
It was unknown how serious Aoko was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
By last time, you mean... the time you went to the city and ate sushi but only came back with a plastic bag full of convenience store food? That time?
Aoko had kicked a hornet's nest.
So what? It was better than nothing, wasn't it? There are times when you'd be better off saying nothing at all.
Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Aoko had certainly crossed the line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Have you ever seen one of those in person, Misaki? The conveyor belts?
They had that kind of thing like at one point, but then now it's not really a conveyor. Now it's like a little Shinkansen that brings it out.
Oh, cool, cute.
Yeah, it's adorable.
Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstances.
Fine, I get it. Does this at least mean we're good now?
Alice went back to her book without as much recognition, so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Aoko anxious.
Well, today has been a total disaster. I guess I'll whip up something in the kitchen.
She stood up, announcing her intent to no one in particular.
Oh? I almost forgot to ask, where did you end up eating anyway?
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up, as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. As she reached the door, she stopped and turned toward Aoko.
You really want to know? Sure.
Aoko nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
The cat gave me one of his leftover deliveries.
And with that brief response, she left the room. Oh yeah, this game has like designated chapter endpoints. And we're 2 hours in, so if the next one's about 2 hours, that's perfect.
Oh.
This is something really cool about this game. They actually have like a shelf here showing
That's nice.
Yeah. Wait, actually, I forgot about this. Yeah, so like, this is the stuff we just read, but then there's also these optional side stories that I think are separate from going to the next chapter. I guess we'll go in order then. So, this might be Sojiro's perspective, so...
Morning in the city moved incredibly fast. It made one wonder if it was a morning at all, with people so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. The unfamiliar roar that awoke him reminded him of a rock slide. The identity of the monstrous sound was the engine of a motorcycle. Mr. Yoshida, his neighbor, was leaving for work. It was hard to determine when night ended and morning begun here. The town's urbanization was synonymous with insomnia.
Already? It's barely sun up yet. Where could Mr. Yoshida be going so early?
He sluggishly lifted himself off the floor. He caught himself staring to survey his surroundings out of habit before deciding better of it, and made his way to the washroom. There, he poured himself a cup of water and slowly gulped it down. Having been relegated to well water until recently, he found the convenience pleasing. Pleased was definitely the word that best described how he felt. Civilization is about erasing inconveniences through optimization. The reduction of labor in our daily lives. Mr. Koga taught him that while the essentials were easier than ever to get our hands on, life itself was growing more and more complex. So too was it his duty to adjust to his new reality. As a distant relative of Sojiro's father, Mr. Koga had taken Sojiro in, and even though the boy had been little more than a stranger in his life until that point. Mr. Koga had helped him get registered at school and find an apartment to lease. Though he had insisted that Sojiro handle his residence card and register his change of address by himself. This series of procedures proved exceedingly difficult for Sojiro, but knowing that this was a part of his new city life, he did his best to complete them diligently.
While they may have had a reputation for being stickler for the rules, city officials aren't all that bad.
It was the first thing Sojiro learned after beginning his life in the city. 2 weeks had elapsed since he left the countryside. As uneasy as living alone made him feel, he felt that he could make it work. It was not as if the people here spoke another language, and Mr. Koga was absolutely right about how practical the rules of the city were. Sojiro continued down the hard but surprisingly walkable path. Before work, he jogged in the park to pass the time. Even exercise like this offered lessons for Sojiro to learn. Each passing person was a new face to look at. The old man who greeted him. The young worker with his eyes to the ground. And the girl on the beach surrounded by birds.
Bench.
Yeah, and the girl on the bench. They were all unfamiliar sights to Sojiro. Unaccustomed to the city, he labored to understand its rules. Whether they were complex or simple, or completely meaningless. Compared to mountain life, which only dealt with nature, city life left one with too many options. You could argue that such an environment was toxic for Sojiro. His life was a string of unsettling moments. But amongst it all, there were rules that he sincerely admired. For one, that the city revolved around various forms of profits and loss. The fact that one only needed money to get bare essentials to survive the city was a comforting thought to Sojiro.
Hey, not everything's that simple. Money's just a symbol. It's the other stuff that truly matters. Money ain't that different from those free shoulder massage coupons people hand out. It's not like the food you buy with a 10,000 yen bill won't turn out bogus. Look, money can't buy you happiness. Like, you know? Maybe. Maybe. Are you for real? Man, I can't believe you right now. One day you're happy to break your back working for a full day for a measly 4,000 yen. Next you're elbow deep in dirty dishes saying, it's all about the money. What's your major malfunction? No, I think the current system is kind of amazing. To be honest, I never realized how limited bartering can be. Anyway, Kinobi, you're gonna drop that if you aren't careful. Huh, crap! Oof! Damn, that was close. If I break any more, it'll be my head next. Thanks for the save. So, what you want to talk about? It's money, isn't it? Exactly. I've learned my lesson the hard way, but now I know that it's better to have more money than less. That's why I'd like to work even more than I am now. Are you for real? You already washed dishes down, dishes like a machine. Didn't I just how money? God damn these typos. Can't buy happiness? Love can, but... Back right up. Why is the water so cold? Say, we should probably get paid more for washing dishes in the winter, huh? It could be alright, but nothing I can't handle. Mountain water is so cold it hurts. Yo, I didn't mean it was ice water, you doofus. That hard head of yours can be real annoying, you know that? For someone who can't even work a cash register couldn't even work a cash register 4 days ago, you sure got comfortable working for the man. I guess money really is everything. The power of capitalism ain't nothing to mess with. Shut your pie holes, part-timers. The door's right there if you want to quit. I don't have the cash to waste on deadbeats. Narration.
The complaints and chopsticks flew up at them like a storm. This mess of a Chinese restaurant manager was a stubborn man who was willing to let minors work for him, and didn't shy from violence, even if it was directed at the son of a lifelong friend. Sojiro felt that this was what Sparta must have been like.
Look, he's angry. We need to work harder. Oh. Wow, your nose got any browner yet? Man, I'm trying to make the most of my teens. Whatever. Right, been meaning to ask. Are you the type that likes to go out on late night strolls, or more of a bicycle kind of guy? Not that it really matters, but... Huh? It's always late when I go home after the restaurant, but that's not what you're asking, is it? I'm not really into walking when it's late out. Why do you ask? No reason. Like, you just moved here. Kind of weird question, but don't you think the town is dangerous? Not like people are bad or nothing. But I mean, you know, we get 10 attacks like out of a slasher fic every year, right? And since they started, there's... What's a slasher? You don't know? It's like when a thief snatches someone's purse. No, bad example. It's more like someone's killing to see if they can get away with it. A bunch of dead people in the woods near the suburbs. Real gnarly. That's why you shouldn't go out too late. The park in Misaki Hills is a hotspot for weird stuff. Haven't you heard about how they think the freak doing it is some chick with a sliced mouth? Nope, this is the first time I've heard of a sliced mouth woman. Like I said, slasher film shit. They say her mouth extends all the way to her ears. It's a pretty old school kind of urban legend these days. How'd it go again? There's a woman in a code who asked, "Am I beautiful?" in the dead of night. Even if you say she is, she'll follow you home and kill you. Intense chicks like that are a no-no. It's like something you've seen in an American comic book. That sounds really scary. Does she actually follow you home? They say she crawls just in through a window, squeezes her way in like a cockroach. Ugh! I told you not to utter those words in this kitchen. I'm gonna kill you, you little turd.
The back of Kinomi's head exploded in pain with the impact of his boss's frying pan. Ow! Sojiro was reminded of just how dangerous this town could be.
I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. Yeah, right. I'd like to see him try. What kind of boss says that anyway? This is a restaurant, ain't it? Well, maybe calling it that is too much. Is your head okay, Kinomi? Huh? Ah, it's nothing. People tell me I'm real tough, especially my head. Anyway, avoid the dark, okay? You look like a sitting duck. Thanks. By the way, is 10 victims per year a lot? Don't know. It probably isn't a lot, but it totally ain't a few either. Real scary shit is that they're still out there somewhere since they haven't been caught.
He laughed cheerfully. Kinomi was probably trying to take the edge off of the story, but the noble intention of his laugh was completely lost on Sojiro. His friendly warning was equally futile. Sojiro was simply impressed that Kinomi was able to laugh it off. On the way home, nobody ahead or behind, Sojiro proceeded through the dimly lit street when suddenly he turned to face an improbable sound.
Ouch.
Something stabbed him in the head and he fell to the floor. Well, goodbye.
The thing fell to the floor, not him.
Oh.
Yeah.
He frowned. A small bird had apparently flown into this telephone pole before landing on his head. The starling cleaned itself off and flew away. The falling of the bird, and its desperate escape thereafter, was unlike anything he had experienced in his life until now. Most of the townsfolk would have seen the incident as unlucky, ominous, or even sinister, but Sojiro just nodded and went about his business. You understand. What might have been what might have been a first for him was surely an everyday occurrence for these city folk.
Back to the Konji Mansion.
I'm home. Alice, are you here yet? I got some stuff from the arcade while on the way home from church. They're Isaya rice crackers. You want to share some?
Her voice reverberated through the foyer, dyed in the colors of the setting sun. It was after 5 in the afternoon when Aoko, still in her school uniform, cheerfully returned home. She had finished her student council duties and attended her monthly meeting with the church.
Welcome back. I see that the meeting went as planned.
The voice was coming from the second floor. In contrast with Aoko and her boundless energy, a considerably calmer girl descended from above.
There were some complaints, but all in all, it went well. Our problems are ours alone, so I decided not to get them involved. You okay with that, Alice? Yes, I'd ask for their help in a pinch, but they can't be trusted. We'll call on them to clean up the mess as usual. Agreed. No one likes to have to keep looking out over their shoulder. We can't fully commit to this if we're worried about what's going on elsewhere. Well, I can, but you don't have time for that, do you, Aoko?
Tap, tap. The graceful sound of her steps, Alice entered the foyer. As she did, Aoko's eyes were directed towards the skylight above.
The glass is kind of dirty. I wanted to discuss that after today's business is concluded, that is. Are you feeling okay, Aoko? You can rest if you're not. Huh? Oh, don't be such a nag. I'm not stressed or anything. Today was pretty normal. Do I look that tired?
School activities went. Today's were a breeze. At a glance, her school life might have seemed almost idyllic. Though the more she thought about it, some headache-inducing incidents may have stood out here and there. And with some introspection, Aoko might have recognized the signs of her own mental fatigue, but doing so would have further added to her stress.
Okay, enough about that. I didn't come home just to stress out over school. What were you learning about today? Mesmerize basics, right? Wish? Then let's get started. I feel like I could master anything today.
Aoko focused on shedding her anger and stress, and headed upstairs with gusto.
Aren't you coming? I thought we were going to do it in your room, Alice.
The formally dressed Alice nodded in slight dissatisfaction.
Are we going to eat those Isaya rice crackers today, or...
She looked at the freshly baked treats Aoko was holding. In the end, our lesson took place after Alice had her cup of tea. For an apprentice like Aoko, Alice Koonji was the kind of roommate to teacher that was hard to come by. She insisted that Aoko rest to preserve her health. Aoko had no choice but to comply. The lesson was over after 2 hours, so the two finished the dinner they had prepared and decided to change a change of venue for where they would spend the last hours of the day. The sunroom was next to the drawing room in the east wing of the residence and offered a view of the beautiful grounds. The Brad Kuwanji Estate's luxurious sunroom featured furnishings on par with those of the splendid drawing room. Meanwhile,
It's going to be a jungle come next year's summer.
the grounds outside had fallen into disrepair, neglected by the owner.
Don't you have any landscaping ploys lying around, Alice?
Aoko took a step into the sunroom and poured some tea.
I'm sure I could find one, but that would take some effort.
It'll be a while before this is thoroughly explained, but I'll just say ploys are a type of familiar. Just see if somebody
Oh.
do. Yeah. Playing around with the roommate's joke, Alice made to sit in her chair. Just as she caught sight of the box of chocolates on the table, her lovely eyes narrowed in a frown.
Don't be like that. Today's script was half your fault, you know. Maybe the rice crackers threw us off our game, or maybe it was me being too aggressive that turned that wish into a gander, but still. We're down 6 pieces. We are? Wait, that's what you're upset about?
Aoko's eyes stared intently at the box of chocolates. You could search the world and never find a finer selection of chocolates. The brand was Sixpence Songs, apparently.
So, what was it about the mirror that you wanted to talk about? It's still in Misaki mode, right? Not Mansion mode? Yes, the mansion can take care of itself for the time being. So I changed its target to Misaki City. Things have been cloudy there since yesterday. Now I know for certain that with each passing day, the forces arrayed against us grow. You mean, there's more of those things? There's the one that was captured, and I've witnessed 2 other suspicious types. One in the city and one in the woods outside of town. Is it too much to ask that you could be wrong just this once? Which one is causing the biggest ruckus? The one in the woods. I'm getting close to capturing it, but it knows it's being watched. It's not taking the bait. I see. You want to go after it tonight?
To go after it tonight. One simple suggestion that would change the course of her life forever. It was no overstatement to say that this was a roll of the dice that would decide whether she had the moxie to survive the experience of jumping out of a plane with a torn parachute. Aoko swallowed her hesitation and fear with a little tea. On the school's anniversary night, she decided that she had made up her mind, and from that time on, she would not waver. Alice welcomed her roommate's strength with the barest hint of regret. As someone who shared the same motivations as her, Alice was ultimately reassured by Aoko's resolve. Well, perhaps more pleased than reassured. All in all, it had taken the better part of a year, but finally Aoko had stepped out of Alice's shadow. The 2 partners now shared the same fate. Aoko was not the partner Alice had asked for, but a partner nonetheless. Strangers, worlds apart. And even if eventually that they would battle each other to the death using all they had inherited, it was only right they did it on equal terms. It was, at least for now, a cause for celebration for how far Aoko had come.
Generous, but I'll be fine on my own tonight. The time would be better spent practicing mesmerize a little more. The park is under your jurisdiction, so I'll put you to work when the time comes.
Alice did not so much as look at Aoko as she explained her reasons. The scale of the enemy she would face that night. Her plans for Aoko. For only 2 days from now, Aoko Aozaki would be reborn.
Fine, whatever you say.
Aoko finished her tea and stood up from her seat.
I guess I'm practicing then. How did the first part go again? Be light and frail, nimble and fast. Tick-tock, tick-tock. There's no time to waste. That right? No. You're missing the quiet part, remember? The weight of the air, the tremble of one's breast. Light lags behind while shadows pull ahead. Be careful, or you may find yourself in a state of unease. Yeah, I remember now. Now if you excuse me.
Aoko grabbed a piece of chocolate and popped it into her mouth. Okay, sorry, I was just thinking about that line there. I think that's going to be important later in the story, and just I think that's actually referring to like the double speak where there's like furigana above text that says something completely different.
Ooh.
She waved before leaving Alice alone in silence. Alice stiffened a moment before slamming the box of chocolates shut as if it could serve to scold Aoko for snacking. Oh. This is where we get to see what this game looks like in action mode.
Ooh.
Good morning. Time check. 0000. 24 hours since last update. Running backup. Transmitting log. Commencing local scan. Atmospheric analysis. Nitrogen, nominal. Oxygen, nominal. Argon, nominal. Carbon dioxide, nominal. Theoretical fifth element. Multiple anomalies detected. Local space-time discrepancy detected. Conclusion, contact. Class 1 threat. Shifting perception range from subjective to objective. Shifting autonomous circuit to reserve power. Shifting diagnostic circuit to main power. Shifting view mode. IR filter, inactive. I filter, active. Or imaginary number filter? Now it begins. Initiating combat log. O Master, preserve me from harm. Misaki City was a thickly wooded area. Urban development continued unabated, but Mother Nature still drew breath in its outskirts. Wise old trees had been turned to lumber. The leaves had begun to turn to mulch. Even though the birds who curiously tilted their heads had moved on, the verdure lived on, a testament to its enduring strength. Until the time came that the devouring light of civilization became powerful enough to encroach upon nature's mysterious domain. These woods were no exception. The outlying border between Misaki City and Misaki Hills had been left untouched. Though driven from their nests and dens here, wildlife continued to subsist even today. No longer able to return to the days before man, this was just like any other forest situated next to a town. This is Alice singing. Actually, let me turn on the voices just for a second so you know what it sounds like. Wait. Okay. That's going to be happening throughout this part. Winter had arrived in the woods. The chill cut like a razor. The icy air so thick it could reach one's bones. Exposed cheeks stiffened, and wisps of breath formed swirls in the air before disappearing. It was 1 degree above freezing. The cold snap penetrated every nook and cranny of the woods, from the ground to the trees to the wildlife. Do you want to do it, Misaki?
The cloud jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed.
You do know the sorcery arm, right?
Kind of.
Yeah.
I forget how it really goes, though.
The forest allowed nobody entry during the day. During the winter, it willed the animals to slumber. The still evening air felt like a stagnant breath of lingering dread. The forest consumed the moonlight, obscuring the sight of even the closest of precipices, and hastening the untimely doom of any soul unfortunate enough to become lost within. The only noise to be heard were the whisperings of the wind and the murmurings of the stream. The immortal darkness stifled any sense of life. Not the breath of an animal, much less that of a person, was drawn in this place. However, a figure in black, not of this place, skulked within. It cast the tiniest, frailest of silhouettes, like a small boat lost in a sea of fog. Its trepidatious footsteps echoed through the woods. There, exiting the veil of trees, was the unmistakable likeness of a young girl.
You see such craft, and the dish ran away with the spoon.
Okay, so these two are twins. One's a boy, one's a girl. I don't know which is which, but it doesn't really matter. Someone's here, someone's here.
There they are, there they are.
Who can they be? Who can they be?
Someone and someone.
Are you hungry?
Starving.
Which one should we eat?
Let's eat them both.
You take the left.
You take the right.
We must welcome them.
We must entertain them.
After all, we don't
After all,
often
we don't
have ghosts.
often have guests.
While we're at it, the stomach and the tibia.
Then we get to chew the fat.
The shadows in the trees laugh ominously. Hallucination, an illusion, or perhaps something real? The shadows frolicked in time to the girl's pace. Come, come.
Deeper and deeper.
Did you remember to rig the dice?
Loaded innards they have.
Nibbled around the edges they be. Oh,
Just remember,
yeah.
don't roll that vital six.
The girl knitted her eyebrows. She heard the voices and felt the presence of things that should not be. Scary enough to frighten this particular girl. As if her tightly pursed lips betrayed not a hint of fear. The girl walked of her own volition. If she had truly felt fear, her legs would be frozen deep within the trees. She was perfectly aware of the two humanoid figures stalking her through the night, the still night air. I saw them. I saw them.
Saw them.
Oh,
Oh, oops.
yeah.
They're coming, they're coming.
Give up.
There's no going back.
We warned you.
It's your fault for staying.
The girl halted her steps. Back from the accompanying voices died in turn. The babbling brook suddenly sounded like a crackling fire. And then, across the shallow stream, something appeared that should not exist in the city, much less in these woods.
Good evening. I don't suppose I could speak to your master?
The girl addressed them calmly. These men were with their Glasgow grins creeped towards her like two slugs.
I see. Simple graveyard wards, sent to be lookouts. My mistake. I should have entrusted this to Aoko. However...
The one grinning man stood still. The other, shaking violently as unable to contain himself any longer, turned toward the girl.
Aoko still has a lot on her plate. Although you far from look the part, you seem to be on the level of a fully fledged mage.
Her black outfit stirred. In her right hand, she held a vitreous cat, darker than the deepest night. The two Glasgow men let out a yelp of caution and incoherent fear. It was at this moment that they had finally bared their intent and emotion.
Farewell, my guests. Since this will take but a moment, I only offer only a goodbye.
The two shuddered at her words. They had no mouths, nor ears or brains to begin with. For creatures like these, words were redundant. As they existed, all that existed was the present. For these soulless creatures, fears and hopes were nothing more than an unimaginable future. Then what could be this feeling of foreboding they felt? The spine-chilling miracle that would rip them to pieces not moments from now.
Come then, puppets. Let us play make-believe.
Her song sounded like a bell, echoing through the white woods. The girl's voice vanquished the frost that had gripped the trees. Then... Come on, don't keep us waiting.
Come on, it's time for the Little Red Riding Hood.
The curtains opened on Diddle Diddle, the banquet of the night. In confusion, one slit-mouthed man swooped toward the girl. In fear, the other fled into the woods behind him. The deformed humanoid darted forth, kicking up water as it rushed at the girl. She already knew what this fiend was. The grinning figure had scissors for hands and a demon's heart. It was a wretch who had kidnapped children, mercilessly rending them into pieces.
Tweedle.
Oh, leave it to us.
It's finally our turn.
The piglets bounded and rebounded like paddle balls. The stuffed animals, over 3 feet in length, jumped and weaved their way between the trees.
Oh, they're piglets? I thought they were cows.
Even with these strange creatures before him, the grinning man did not so much as blink. He raised his arms, but what emerged from the coat sleeves were not human appendages you would expect. In their place, fiendish cleavers, more than 1.5 feet in length. These appendages, which had torn so much of their prey to pieces, sliced cleanly through the flying pig's skulls. His limbs froze in place. The pigs' bodies were sliced perfectly in half. And then, bisected from the head and tail, the pig's innards became his alligator jaws and clamped down upon the grinning man's arms. From fingertips to shoulders, they were swallowed whole. It was all it took to rob the man of control over his entire body. Another shiver of fear. These were no mere pig familiars. Immediately he realized that these were stapler monsters disguised as mere pigs. I got him.
No, I got him.
Oh, but it's too bad Master has no words, no emotion, no interest.
In the end, it doesn't really matter who did it. London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down.
Gah! Impossible. Its presence murmurs 3 times. Not possible, not possible, not possible? Talking pigs were one thing. Even having one's arms chopped off was in the realm of occupational hazard. In an instant, the wood was enveloped in a dense wave of magical energy. Though vexing, it was still impressive. None of these facts were particularly extraordinary. These rare familiars, their bizarre attack, the sheer innate magical energy to overwhelm others. He had experience with all of these things. His employer was skilled enough to achieve all of this as well. However, what now? What now? How long should we hold him like this?
Even a blink of an eye is too long. Let's take an arm.
I'll give you a good price if you'll pay me in pounds. What were they? Not vessels. Not living creatures. Not beings powered by magic circuits. Even though only his arms had been bitten, none of his body would move. There's nothing like being bound or weakened. This felt more like he had become words written in a book, fated to keep their page. As the grinning figure's deformities indicated, he had overcome numerous curiosities and monstrosities, illusions, enthrallment, compulsions, freezing, putrefacitions, and even petrifications, power granted to only the pinnacle of mystic eyes. From poisons to magecraft, he had weathered a great deal, but this was something different altogether. The penalty that bound him now was based on different principles from blood, flesh, oxygen, or heat. It was an unknown restraint that followed no rules he knew. Indeed, though, it was terrifying to admit. It was as if he encountered something alien to everything in this world.
London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down. London Bridge is broken down, my fair lady.
Gah! Fangs sank into his left and right shoulders. For the first time in this form, he felt rage seethe up inside him. The basis of all things had to be absolute. All mystics, all things bizarre obeyed some set of laws. These pigs ignored this, along with his dignity. After 3 days, he weakened.
After 6, you drown.
After half a year, you'll be a wretched skeleton. Sorry to be rude, but we'll kill you now.
Just kill you now.
Sheesh. A howl. Though he had no voice, he let out an exasperated scream. Huh? Oh, that's not. What a convenient function to be able to detach your arms.
What an unparalleled warrior.
Talkative pigs fell into the stream. That exasperated scream was the sound of the figure tearing its arms from their sockets. Armless, he rushed to the girl.
Useless swine. I'll see you be punished. Yeah, I'll see you be punished later.
He may have lost his mangled arms, but not the object of his malice. A Misaki to pierce the heart of his victim. A magic circuit designed to stop a beating heart. It was beautiful in its simplicity. At point-blank range, it was the equivalent of an unavoidable shotgun blast. But, tragically, that eye was all he had.
Build it up with wood and clay, wood and clay, wood and clay. Build it up with wood and clay, my fair lady.
He failed to realize that her song had changed. For the giant, the earth-shattering strike was akin to the act of shooting away an insect. Its green, verdant veins pulsed. Oaken bark covered its body, hardened sufficiently over centuries to repel even a chainsaw. On his forehead, inscribed in all manner of colors, were the words Emeth. Though judging from its misspelling, the inscription was purely decorative. The Thames Troll. It also went by the moniker Falling Down, or alternatively the Great Bridge. Mired in different forms, it was the first of 4 miracles.
James, please take care of the other one.
I'm actually not sure if that's Thames or Thames. Let me look that up real quick. Let's see.
So interesting. Are her texts based off of nursery rhymes, or is she just singing them for fun?
I think they are based on nursery rhymes.
Okay.
Okay, apparently it's Thames. Odd.
Okay.
Yeah. The giant responds to the girl's words. When roots ran deep into the earth, it raised its left arm to the heavens without moving a step. Elsewhere in the forest, the grinning figure who had chosen to flee the battle was running through the night forest at full speed. Record and provide a detailed description of the enemy. Those were the orders assigned to him. He poured all of his energy into escaping this forest with which he had become so familiar. In case of emergency, the plan was for one to challenge the enemy, while the other made a tactical retreat in order to report to their master. He dashed through the forest. Though gripped by fear, he was confident in his ability to perform the mission he was designed for. Nothing could catch him in these woods. Even the wolves could not track him. His bird-like legs stumped as they kicked the ground. Perhaps it was his creator's eccentric taste that dictated their form when optimizing them for running. The grinning man could reach a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour, well past the limit of any bipedal creature. After securing a distance of several miles, he turned around to confirm his safety. There was no sign of pursuit. His crescent-shaped mouth, nay, eyes slackened in relief. And then, after facing forward once more, he looked up to lock eyes with his doom.
London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down.
In the distance, he could hear the dark rhymes of Mother Goose. Countless veins extend from the ground. They formed into a monstrosity that conjured up images of an arched bridge, something resembling a giant arm.
London Bridge is broken down, my fair lady.
Final report. Survival, unable to complete. Analysis, unable to complete. Transmission, unable to complete. Ending session. Oh, Master, preserve me from... So yeah, don't mess with Alice.
Yup. I think we're about done here. Well done, Thames. You can return now. Hopefully, our next encounter will be more worth our time.
The girl turned on her heel. The invaders who had set up shop in the woods were eliminated. She had no interest in whether they had been good or evil, nor how many victims they had claimed. The shackles of civic society had no sway over her. This was the way of a pure-blooded witch, the way of a Meinster. Hey, what about us? What about us?
Let me get this arm out of my teeth.
We really shouldn't move while we're eating.
Don't tell us you don't need pigs that can't fly.
We'll do a better job next time, though we're nothing but screw-ups.
Yeah, you owe us at least one compliment before the end.
The girl let out a sigh and stepped into the stream. She removed her gloves and dipped her slender fingers into the ice water.
I told you not to roll sixes. But I suppose it is the only number you can roll.
There was no response to her melancholy tone. In place of the once boisterous pigs were two black dice, now sitting in the palm of her hand. As the girl was about to say something to the scattered remains around her, she realized something that made her put her hand to her mouth.
The farewell is over. Should I have asked them if they had any final words?
Her slender, pale fingers traced her lips, as if reluctant to part from them. Sighing again, she calmly left the dark woods the same way she had entered. So that was like a good demonstration of like how much bigger budget this game had than the previous visual novels we read. Like,
Oh, heck yeah.
yeah, just actual animation is incredible.
Let us rewind a moment in the recent past. The scene took place on a Saturday morning in early December. With third period over just before lunch, the only activity that remained before the scholastic day ended was homeroom. Two of Class C students, Sojiro's... I hate this though.
Sojiro
Shizuki
Shizuki.
and Hosuke Kinomi were standing outside on the balcony overlooking the schoolyard. They were stuck waiting for their homeroom teacher, Mr. Kazuki Yamashiro, that could not leave until he arrived. The rest of their classmates were chatting idly in the classroom. Class A's Tobimaru Tsukiji was killing time alongside them. The listless trio discussed their weekend plans as they leaned on the veranda's railing.
You working at the Bear this weekend, Kinomi? Like hell I am. Who the hell works till Sunday? I'm going out tomorrow with some chicks from Class B. At least that was the plan. They said they're grounded or something. So in other words, you failed again. He looks really different without the hat.
He does.
Jeez, a man kick a man while he's down, Shizuki? Please, even the most airheaded chicks know better to accept an invite from your dumbass. Crash and burn all you like, but don't drag Sonoji into the fallout, will you? Well, excuse me, your majesty. You're one to talk. Word to the wise, Shizuki. Tsukiji's heart is as black as they come. In his mind, he's like, those labels you use to separate the trash? This dude uses them to label people. You're either useful to him or you ain't. Yeah, I figured that out. Speaking of which, I know this is a bit out of the blue, but what do you think about Kinobi, Tobimaro? Well, you know how the country is going to stop collecting oversized scrap for free soon, since it costs too much to dispose of? That's because of people like him. What kind of nonsense is that? Who's throwing out big stuff like cabinets when you can make good money off of them? The future is grab and go, Just look at those rad disposable cameras you can buy at the convenience store. How rad those cameras at the convenience stores are. What they call it, something about growing consumption culture and all that. It's just... So Kinomi's working this weekend. What about you, Tobimaro? My time is coming. Just watch. There's some business to attend to on my end. I'll be entertaining a guest of my father's, giving a tour of the city, stuff like that. Friggin' rude. Don't interrupt a guy when he's talking. I was gonna say, I'm gonna be watching my kid's sister. I ain't helping out at the crappy Chinese restaurant. What about you, Sonoji? You working tomorrow? No plans, but I'm going to work at the amusement park after school today. What? Magic Kitsy Land? Seriously? You're tougher than you look, Shizuki. I heard even the judo guys who worked there bailed. It couldn't possibly be worse than carrying boxes for X-Fed, right?
Dang, X-Fed.
I actually work at FedEx myself and load the trucks, so it's kind of funny for me. Well, okay, not that bad. Oh, wait. Damn, that a-hole Yamashiro is taking his sweet time. Look, Class B is already leaving. Looks like it. I don't want to pull this card, but we'll just have to call him. We can't let Sonoji be late for work.
And as if by design, the moment Tobimaru Tsukiji stood up warily from the balcony railing, the school's PA system chime rang.
Sojiro Shizuki, Class 2C, please report immediately to Mr. Yamashiro on the faculty room. I repeat, Sojiro Shizuki, Class 2C.
An awkward silence fell upon the three. After a long 5 seconds, Sojiro said goodbye and headed back inside.
Ugh, nothing interesting ever happens here. Can't someone make a crop circle in the schoolyard or something?
Hinomi grumbled, slouching his shoulders and succumbing to his lethargy.
Stop expecting others to make life interesting. If you're bored, then make something happen yourself. Challenge Ozaki to an interclass debate or something. Suffering ain't interesting. Scrapping with the prize is asking for it. I said interesting, not terrifying. As a decent, upstanding, red-blooded male, I'd happily settle for a hot transfer student showing up. As long as she isn't boring anyway. Maybe if she were a Hollywood producer or some famous English singer or... Lame. If you're going that far, at least make her a babe from Mars. Attention, Class 2C. This is an announcement from Mr. Yamashiro. Oh, okay. I actually don't know who's saying this, but... it's probably a girl, honestly. They're usually the announcers for this stuff.
Mr. Yamashiro is currently occupied and is unable to attend homeroom. Please make your way home. This concludes all announcements for the day.
The hell? Ever since Yamashiro bought that new car, he's been a real punk. I ought to find out what this time sounds like when scraping up a new Serbia. Hold it, hotshot. Just put gum in the keyhole. Teachers get paid peanuts, man.
The two frenemies return to the classroom, complaining all the while. Their concern for their mutual friend summoned to the faculty office, completely out of mind. I don't agree. The school allows for students to hold part-time jobs. According to school regulations, a job at a workplace authorized by the school is recommended as a social experience.
That's true, but in this case, it's a matter of going too far. What if, let's suppose, you were working somewhere without permission, somewhere that might be violating the labor standards law? That would spell trouble for both the school and for him. The volatile tension between the ruthless student council president and the easygoing modern language teacher permeated the room. Praying to be spared from the impending confrontation, the other teachers hurriedly relocated to the meeting room. By the time Mr. Yamashiro noticed this, the only other person in the room was the student council president, Aoko Aozaki. They all ran, huh? Why does everyone always push the CRA jobs on me? They're so mean.
Don't change the subject, sir. If we do suppose that he is working at an unauthorized workplace, doesn't that mean that the school isn't accommodating his needs? I'm not saying that the school needs to cover his room and board, but as long as he's not working too much, his request deserves due consideration. And if you're still concerned about the unauthorized workplaces, please first revise the rule that limits each student to only one.
After hearing her out and realizing that there was no way she would back down, Mr. Yamashiro hung his head. This was supposed to be easy. The plan was to call in the student rumored to be working multiple jobs, confirm whether the rumor was true, and if so, give him a warning and some guidance, then head to lunch with the knowledge that all was right with the world. The student council president, who was coincidentally in the faculty room at the time, had heard the entire issue and decided to call out this injustice. As far as Mr. Yamashiro was concerned, she was in the right, and he was well aware of the aforementioned student situation. Personally, he would have liked to help, but among the faculty, he was just the new kid on the block. He wanted to stay on the vice principal's good side, and at the very least not lose his job, as badly paid as it was. Look, this was a warning straight from the vice principal. I can't do anything more to help.
What if we compromised?
What do you mean? The student council president removed a document from her bag. It was a document that had been brought up in the morning's faculty meeting, bringing a host of headaches with it. Miss Aozaki, that's not the...
Yes, this is the Ida Church's volunteer registration form. There are 0 applicants again this month, a fact that would certainly bother a devout Christian like the vice principal. Even this morning, he was lamenting over our students' lack of faith.
I can't deny that, but what I'd really like to know is how you became so well informed of the content of this morning's faculty meeting. Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, but his eyes were smiling gleefully. He had figured out the student council president's objective. So, I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch mine, is that it? Work conducted on the church's behalf is done on a voluntary basis, but still compensated in some form. It's officially recognized by the school as a form of social study. The vice principal will be overjoyed to have a participant, and
in the event that said volunteer is already employed somewhere else, the school's permission will be extended to both. Considering the precedent, I find this to be a good compromise.
Mr. Yamashiro raised his hands in surrender. There were few students able to both raise a complaint and propose a proper solution. Perhaps it was her big sisterly disposition that made this girl so simultaneously feared yet trusted. Alright, let's try it your way. Just say a prayer for me, okay?
I don't like it when people are overly reliant on others. If you're going to participate in this scheme, please take your part seriously, Mr. Yamashiro.
With a bow, the student council president turned to leave the faculty room. Wait a second. You're not going anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and call on Shizuki now, so I'll need you to stay and look after him properly.
What?
The girl's cool eyes narrowed. Unable to process what she just heard, her expression turned to a scowl. If we're looking for volunteers, two is better than one, right? Plus, knowing that you're following up on this would give me a great peace of mind.
But, sir, I don't...
Hello, broadcasting room. Please put out an announcement asking for Class 2C student Sojiro Shizuki to report to Mr. Yamashiro in the staff room immediately.
No, sir, like I was about to say.
Oh, this is perfect. To think that the source of my headache would go away too. Today's my lucky day. Miss Aozaki, what would I do without your kindness? Wait a second. He's not your type, is he? Oh, broadcasting room. Please add the following. The student council president is eagerly awaiting.
Mr. Yamashiro? That is very nice of her to help, like, defend his jobs.
Yeah. Alright, it's back
That
to...
next day, a pleasant Sunday, Sojiro was awake 2 hours before the time he was supposed to meet her. After getting up, he decided to go for a leisurely jog to clear his mind, but lost among his own thoughts, his 30-minute jog turned into almost an hour. Upon realizing, he rushed home. After thoroughly racking his brains over what to wear for the occasion, he decided upon wearing his school uniform.
10 o'clock. Misaki Central Park, East Entrance. Oh, wait, Oh, I'll meet you there.
Meet you there.
I think, yeah, he was saying that. Yeah. All right.
Yesterday in the faculty room, when Aoko Aozaki had shared the time and place with him that day, she said it with such a pain on her face. Maybe she was fighting a headache at the time.
Yeah, there we go. I do wonder if Aozaki is feeling better.
Sojiro muttered, his words of concern misguided as they were. In any case, he waited for about 5 minutes. At precisely 10 o'clock, the student council president appeared. Punctual as usual, I see. What's wrong with your face? Are you sick?
No, I think I feel fine.
He waved off her concern.
Alright, since they're together, I guess I'll narrate. You're wearing your school uniform.
Of course I'm wearing my uniform. This is a school activity, isn't it?
A heavy weight of despondency fell upon Sojiro's shoulders. The angsting over his outfit for the previous 2 hours has been rendered meaningless just like that. By the way, I didn't get a good look at this background earlier. Just so much detail over here. And this is probably a photo that they edited, because like that's obviously Uniqlo.
Yeah, that's Uniqlo for sure. Beans.
Yeah. Okay. Duo clad in school uniforms on a day off walked by the train station. In the beginning, Aoko had made efforts to give Sojiro a thorough lay of the land, but today she only shared the bare minimum of explanations. This was partly because, surprisingly, Sojiro had become well accustomed to the town. Which restaurants were good, which shortcuts to use in a rush, and why the nearby bicycle shop was better than the department store by the station if you wanted to buy a bicycle. Things a local would know. But the other reason was because it had dawned on Aoko how the two of them conversing might look to passerby. On a different topic, do you mind telling me what kind of work we'll be doing today? From here on, volunteering at the church meant the school would tolerate his multiple jobs. Sojiro had quickly agreed to the tempting offer, nodding like a bobblehead, but as was typical for him, he had failed to consider the content of the proposal.
Somehow, I just knew you had no idea what we were going to be doing today. Is this your first time going to Ida Church?
This is my second time. Last time was because I was outside admiring the strange architecture. Then a person inside gave me some free candy. He pondered with all sincerity how exactly a church worked. His contemplative posture made him appear as part of a philosopher, but after all his thinking, he concluded, I guess they start taking your money on your second visit. That is typically how a church works, yes. Such was the extent of Sojiro's concerns.
Normally, the church only gives candy out to children, you know.
Aoko sighed at the lost little lamb.
So, who did you end up meeting? The priest? One of his sisters?
A very beautiful woman, as it happens.
Oh, Sister Yuika then. If we see her today, you'll need to thank her, or then again, no need. You're doing just fine in that department anyway.
I like how she immediately knows which sister based on that description.
Like, okay, yeah, the beautiful one. As far as work goes, it's not much different from what you've been doing at school, so it should be straightforward. And considering the church's size, there's actually not a lot of people.
Aoko picked up her pace as they headed for the church. Somehow she seemed like a general invading enemy territory. It made Sojiro furrow his brows in discomfort. Ida Church had a long history. Far from the station, it was a white painted sanctuary nestled between the business and residential districts. As far as Aoko could remember, the church, as she knew it now, was the result of remodeling done 8 years prior. It was practically a cathedral for a town of this size. Incidentally, located next to it was the Misaki City General Hospital. From Aoko's perspective, it seemed awfully suspicious for the church to take up residence next to the location in the city where the most lives were lost. Though the only two who were aware of this opinion were her roommates Alice Koonji and the priest. Are you a regular at this place?
Me? Not in the slightest. My father and grandfather had a long history with it. But if I could, I'd go back in time and cut off all of our ties to this place. I had to come here every day in the elementary school. In elementary school to help out, and boy, did that ever rub me the wrong way.
The more Aoko spoke, the more twisted her expression became. Recalling this made her want to grab it by the proverbial collar, give it the proverbial one-arm judo back throw, smash its proverbial head into the proverbial ground, and kick the proverbial living daylights out of its defenseless proverbial torso. Such was her so-called trauma that, if it were anthropomorphized, it would take more than a 5-round beating to satisfy her thirst for vengeance. It was in this moment as he became aware of Aoko's mood that Sojiro began to fear for his safety. Perhaps attracted by the noisy murder of crows outside the church, a woman in a nun's habit emerged from the front entrance.
Excuse me? Do you have business with the church today? I'm afraid this church does not associate with criminals, so if you would be so kind as to consider coming another day, or perhaps returning once you have repented of your sinful ways and paid for your crimes to society, you can. It's Aoko Aozaki, Sister Yuika. Well, if it isn't Aoko... What a lovely surprise. It's been such a long time since you visited. I suppose it has. I'm only ever called at night to speak with the father. I suppose it's been, close to a year since we had a face-to-face conversation. And who knows how long it'll be until the next time. Yes, I'm almost sad to see you grow up so fast. Your presence has become so menacing. You hardly resemble the virtuous girl I remember so well.
On the surface, the two exchanged congenial greetings. Unable to read between the lines, all Sojiro could see was two good friends.
Me and I are this month's volunteers.
For the beloved
For the beloved Ida Church, it would be our pleasure to be working from exactly 10 to 3 and not a minute more.
It's been happening a lot with this game. Like the quotes end, but then there's more quote on the next line.
Yeah, that part's confusing.
I don't know if that's a typo or some weird formatting thing, but...
Well, as you know, we are reaching the end times, but your spirit of service is welcome. The house of the Lord is open to all who might enter, even those with wickedness in their hearts.
The nun flashed a smile with equal parts elegant and cruel. Keeping up appearances aside, she seemed overjoyed to have able hands to put to work. The sister introduced herself as Yuika Suze, and thanked Sojiro, who had volunteered of his own volition. Sojiro noticed that her eyes were always shut, but not wanting to be rude, especially in front of Aoko, decided not to pry.
So you're Mr. Shizuki. Your name is as calm as your countenance.
Is it? Well, thanks. The sister let slip a frown at Sojiro's ambivalent response to her compliment.
I apologize. I did not mean to cause discomfort by using your surname. May I call you Sojiro instead?
Oh, whichever. Either one is fine.
Well then, as you wish. I had not appreciated how difficult a subject it would be.
Though the sister's tone was gentle, her words seemed somewhat indifferent. She lacked sight, but she guided the two with certainty in her step.
Well then, as for what you'll be doing... I already know. Christmas is coming up, so you want to get all the tedious cleaning out of the way, right? That won't be a problem. Cleaning is our strong suit.
It wasn't their strong suit as much as it was Sojiro's.
Then Aoko, you'll be at the stove preparing the communion wafers. Mr. Shizuki, you'll be outside. I need your help cleaning the areas I can't reach. One question. Ritsuka isn't in the kitchen, is she? You can't make me go in if in there she is. Don't worry. Ritsuka is not here right now. There is no need to hold back on her account.
With a dismissive wave, Aoko headed toward the door in the back of the worship hall. As she had indicated, she was quite accustomed to this church.
This way, please, Mrs. Shizuki. We will start with the storeroom. I'd like to ask you to carry the cleaning supplies.
I guess since it's him now.
The work entrusted to Sojiro did not require any particular skill. It was window cleaning at its most standard.
Should I clean all the windows?
Yes, start with a wet rag, then wipe with a dry rag, then use the cleaning spray. Is the ladder tall enough?
Oh, it looks like it might be a little short.
Then just clean what you can reach. Thank you very much. After the brief exchange, the sister returned to the church. Sojiro began to wonder if it was out of distrust in him that she was being so curt. He understood that it was too soon to glean an answer from her from their first meeting, but then again, such answers always eluded Sojiro. Left alone but no less encouraged, Sojiro began cleaning the windows. The day's weather was a disappointment once again. It had not gone so far as to rain, but it was too overcast to enjoy the sun. He leaned against a tall ladder and, beginning with a window about 5 yards from the ground, quietly cleaned. Sojiro was never the kind of person to mind physical labor. In fact, if there had been a blue sky, this might have been a perfect day off to him. By the time he finished his third or fourth window, he felt very relaxed and began to whistle. Though 15 feet was an intimidating height, it proved for a wonderful view at the same time. Turning toward the town gave Sojiro a clear view of the tree-topped hill that had previously caught his eye.
So there really is a house in the woods.
The hill in the woods just outside of town. From here, the forest overlooking the sleepless city looks like a foreign castle.
I think this is another girl.
Well, do we have a burglar? Just then, lost in his thoughts and wiping windows, Sojiro was pulled out of his trance by someone pacing below him. He looked down and saw a girl, her unkempt clothes otherwise contrasting with her kind visage. But you look a little too loosey-goosey to be a thief. Wait, I know. Maybe you're the type that jumps out of people's fireplaces and give them toys they don't need. Like that one saint. Oh, but I just can't stand this beard. You know, all that guy's doing is breaking and entering, right? She looked to be in her late 20s. Despite the cold, she was not wearing a coat. She had no purse either, which was rather strange as the woman and her purse were never far apart. Not that Sojiro knew this truth quite yet. Based on the fact that none of this seemed to apply to her, one could have easily surmised that she was herself a little loosey-goosey. Few cards short of a full deck, one might also say. Oh, I got it. Are you the part-timer from Misaki High? Wow, high schoolers these days are really something. He put the pros to shame. The girl looked up in admiration to Sojiro as he stood atop his ladder. Cool, let me help. Is there another ladder and rags? Since we're doing this anyway, why don't we just use this hose? You know, spray water all over the place, yelling and having a good time. We might get in trouble, but a little fun never hurt anybody, right? The girl let out a hearty laugh. Her smile glowed like a cactus that had sprouted legs and begun to run about. Inasmuch as running a running cactus could only cause trouble. As Sojiro anticipated, the girl began to clean without waiting for his approval. So I was walking by the church and I saw a figure stuck to the window. A daylight burglary seemed pretty bold, I thought, but my curiosity got the best of me. Imagine my surprise when I saw such a cute boy working diligently as a window wiping expert. You can't blame a girl for wanting to help out after seeing that, can you? Wiping the window next to Sojiro, the girl continued to cheerfully chatter. Although this was all kinds of suspicious, Sojiro politely followed her lead, nodding and agreeing as she spoke. Perhaps it was an instinctive camaraderie. He sensed this girl was just like him, always getting the short end of the stick when it comes to menial work.
So are you from the church?
Me? No, I was just passing by. More importantly, why are you acting like we've never met before? Don't you remember all those times we met in the shopping mall?
No, when did that happen?
All the time, silly. You work at the restaurant. Uotatsu, right? I was there several times just this week. Alright. I'm Hanazawa. What's your name? Hanazawa took a quick glance at the flower bed below in the middle of her introduction, then gave him a friendly laugh. Sojiro's self-introduction, however, was his usual brand of awkward. Sojiro, huh? Your name's cute, like an old-fashioned kind of way. The Ju in your name means 10, right? Names with numbers in them are so Japanese, don't you think? Do you know the priests and sisters here? Eiri and Yuika? The names sound so foreign.
I don't know Eiri, but Yuika was the one with the pretty dark hair, right?
Oh, so you haven't met the priest yet? Ida Church is famous for its handsome priests and beautiful sisters, you know? Oh, that's right. You just moved here. You're living on your own, right?
Yes. You're really sharp, Miss Hanazawa. You seem to be pretty good at guessing things about me.
Call deductive reasoning, silly. This town doesn't have much to do for fun. Certainly not enough that a kid like you would need to work at this church. That you'd need to work this much. Normally, you just need one job to cover spending money. You don't seem like the materialistic type either. Which leaves living expenses as the only wholesome reason for working this hard, right? Then again, it isn't very wholesome for a student to be paying for his own room, board, and tuition.
Not necessarily. Don't they say he who doesn't work doesn't eat?
Well, Sojiro, you're pretty mature for your age. When I was a student, I was completely absorbed in work too, so I understand how difficult things must be for you.
Oh, you lived by yourself as well, Miss Hanazawa?
Yeah, I studied abroad over my parents' objections. I went to the same school as a friend and we roomed together to save money. But food wasn't free, as you know. That said, I'm the kind of person who doesn't mind a bit of elbow grease. Looking back on it now, my time at school and work was a great memory. Sojiro nodded agreeably. Dignified or not, he could barely hold back the sense of solidarity that was welling up within him. Well, since this might be fate, I'll probably be seeing more of you at Uotatsu from here on out. Come see me if you need someone to talk to. I can't promise I'll be of much help, but I'll do my best impression of a sounding board.
It might be fate or it might be Tsukihime. Who can say at this point?
Yep.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Maybe you can help me out right now. What do they actually do here?
As Sojiro said here, he pointed at the church. What do you mean? Even Hanazawa was taken aback by his question. Unaware of Sojiro's provincial background, Combined with her quick-witted nature, Hanazawa seemingly mistook his question for some kind of sophisticated wit. Good question. I guess people treat it as a spiritual sanctuary. Is that the right word for it? No, maybe not sanctuary, more like a shield or a place that plugs leaks in your mind. It's basically a way for people to avoid getting better. Oh, and they give out free bread and wine.
For free?
Sure, I mean, I've heard rich people just donate a bunch of money anyway. Oh yeah, one more thing. And this is the most important wrinkle their income... the most important wrinkle. Their income isn't taxed. Saving cells is tough work, but it's no risk, high reward if you've got a solid business plan.
Is that so? I don't really follow, but are you saying that it's a good place to come when you're in trouble?
I wouldn't recommend that. I think it would be better if you visit once a month or so, just for a little peace of mind.
The rag squeaked as the two carefree souls continued to wipe down the windows. Whistling as they went, they shined up one window, then another, then another. Oh yeah, one more question. What are those woods over there?
Woods? What woods? You mean the woods in the mountains?
Well, yeah, but that's really more of a hill than a mountain. Oh,
As someone raised in the countryside, Sojiro's pride would not allow for amount of dirt to be called a mountain. Think so? Any incline that takes energy to climb is a mountain in my book, but if you say so. It was as if a shadow fell over her till now sunny disposition. She was undoubtedly a beautiful woman with very lovely features. But as Sojiro looked at her in that moment, her smile melted away, and he saw how disturbed she was at his comment. And when it comes down to it...
It's definitely a hill. Oh, and what about that thing that looks like a chimney?
Sojiro was not one to closely watch people's reactions and fuss over his speech. It looks like a chimney because it's a chimney. The forest is all private property, and a huge mansion sits right in the middle of it. None of the locals really know anything about it because they're not allowed in there. People call it Kuonji Haunted Mansion. The locals are all spooked by it, so it's probably best that you keep your distance. For a tiny wooded area, there have been all kinds of freaky stories about the place. Weird accidents, with wild dog sightings, you name it.
Wild dogs? You get wild dogs here in the city too?
Lots of them. There are even some in the empty lot behind the church. The priest here's a bit eccentric, and one time he gave them some bread, and the pups made the area part of their patrol route. Anyway, don't go up there. You know what they say about idiots in high places. It's something of an unspoken rule around here to stay out. For one thing, it's private property. If you trespass, someone's going to call the cops, and then you're going to have to spend the rest of your day getting grilled at the station. That doesn't sound like much fun, does it? Sojiro nodded along to her story as he stared off at the far-off chimney from his vantage point on the ladder. A teeny tiny part of him was curious about the hill, because it reminded him of the woods where he grew up. But after reminding himself that it was none of his business, he returned to the window washing. Thanks to Hanazawa lending a hand, they were able to finish the job without a hitch. Between the two of them, they'd accomplished a simple but very time-consuming task. Nice work. I hardly recognize these windows considering how filthy they were before. Why don't we head to a cafe somewhere and get something to drink? I'll treat you as a reward for all your...
Miss Hanazawa? You were in the middle of... You were in the middle of saying so...
sorry. I just remembered some urgent business I need to attend to. Catch you later. Ciao! By the time Sojiro, who had started putting away the ladder, turned around, he was only able to catch a glimpse of the girl's figure dashing toward the streets at lightning speed. It was just before 3 o'clock. More than 3 hours had passed since Hanazawa offered to help. Sojiro watched the girl with many strange faces disappear. For someone who had seemed to have been on an aimless walk, Hanazawa had spent a good deal of time with him. Maybe helping Sojiro out reminded her of something she needed to do. Shizuki, are you out here?
Student council
The
president.
student council president popped her head out from the corner of the church. Don't mind me. You do your thing. The sight of Sojiro putting away the ladder, taller than himself, seemed to have provoked an emotional response of Aoko. Then, in an instant, she rolled up her sleeves and began to approach him. This surprised him more than Aoko's sudden appearance. Ignoring Sojiro's bewilderment, Aoko promptly began issuing orders. Put the ladder on its side. I'll hold the bottom, so you take the top. She did all this so matter-of-factly that Sojiro began lowering the ladder before he even had a chance to insist that he could do it by himself.
I think I'll take over now. I think they're back together again, so. With work finished and the sisters' thank you gifts in hand, the two put the church behind them. Since Aoko apparently had something to do at the station, they decided that they would walk together until they got there.
You're a really hard worker.
Beneath the orange-tinted sky, Aoko spoke more as though she was expressing her thoughts out loud than striking up a conversation. Really? Coming from you, Aozaki, that's really nice to hear. Sojiro gave an earnest smile. But then again, he had been beaming over ever since he received his pay, so the source of his joy was not so clear.
Not so fast. You still got ways to go, Buster. So don't get too carried away. You're only just breaking even, if that.
You're not going to get on my back about school, are you? That'll really spoil my mood. Sojiro hung his head dejectedly. Even if his job had been going well, school was still a bust. Exams were one thing, but even classwork was something he had found himself falling behind in. Why do you hate people with bad grades, Aozaki?
Well, dealing with lame brains is certainly tiring. But that's besides the point, in your case. And don't let this get to your head. We're not friends, okay? It's the teacher's job to figure out how to help students overcome handicaps. And it's your job to follow through on that help. Having a job is fine with me, but make sure you study properly when you get home.
You can count on me. Everyone at the school is good people.
Fine, if you say so. Wait, did you say everyone is good people?
Aoko cocked her head to one side, unsure of how this exchange had resulted in that response. She decided to interpret it as Sojiro simply expressing his gratitude in his own peculiar way.
Oh, one more thing. I need to know what kind of other jobs you're working, in case it comes up.
If you're asking where, I work at a lot of places in the shopping district. The fish shop, flower shop, and so on. Oh, but yesterday I went over to the next town. I worked a shift at the amusement park. Since the only school-authorized locations were in the Misaki shopping district, your response was much as she expected. That is, except for the decidedly unexpected last part.
When you say amusement park, you don't mean the one in Yashirogi, do you?
That's the one. I disassembled and moved unused signs and curios and stuff. It was exhausting.
That's so. Yeah, I can imagine it took a lot out of you.
This left Aoko rather impressed. Transporting unused amusement park machinery was not a job that students did willingly in their free time.
I'm a bit jealous. I've never even been to Kitsuland, even though it's so close to me.
So I wonder if this is the theme park that we see in Melty Blood as a battle background, because it never came up in the story.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Aoko looked up in the direction of the neighboring town. From here you could just barely make out the Ferris wheel. The round steel frame of the wheel, illuminated by the sunset as it was reminiscent of an old gravestone. That's a shame. Is it because you're short on cash? Aoko had to stifle her laughter. She knew it would be rude to Sojiro to burst out laughing, but the remark tickled her funny bone.
No, it's not like that. It's simple, really. Even back when it first opened, it was always packed with people. I just never had the time to go. If we're a problem that could be solved but with money, I would go right now.
Aoko showed Sojiro the envelope that contained the pay from the church. There was nothing sinister about her remark and gesture, but the fact that she did not jump at the chance to go made Sojiro sad. Then why don't we go sometime?
Thanks, but no can do. You probably didn't catch on because you are who you are, but the place went out of business. I think it's been about 2 years since the park closed down.
What? It was no wonder there were no customers at all the time he was there. Exasperated as she was at Sojiro, the student council president seemed to be enjoying herself. At this point, she would be yelling at things at Sojiro like,
I can't believe you didn't know that.
but this evening, this one and only evening, she found it charming.
So if that place has been closed for 2 years, what was he doing there for work?
Apparently moving, like, I guess like they still had like old parts there that had to get moved or something, but
Yeah, I guess they're disassembling stuff.
yeah.
They parted ways, and Sojiro returned home to his apartment, immersed himself in his studies, and before he knew it, it was time to go to work. The major cultural difference, though certainly not the only point of difference, between city and country was the use of time. It did not matter what part of the city he was in, time flowed far too quickly here. Failing to squeeze even a drop of knowledge from his textbooks, he put them away for the day before heading into town. The night grew deeper as today turned into tomorrow. Sojiro reversed his collar to protect his neck from the bitter cold and began to make his way back home. Not a soul to be seen, no dogs scrounging for food, no late-night shoppers. Why would there be? The solitary convenience store in the area closed at 11 o'clock. He muttered with what little energy he had to take in an especially deep breath. Man-made landmarks lined the deserted street. Garish blue fluorescent lights, brighter than the stars above, illuminated the darkness. Oh, they have the nice lights. Heck, like a lot of the lights here are still the yellow ones. An unconscious sense of anxiety stirred within him.
Get yourself together. It's normal for the night to be scary.
A chill crept up his spine as he attempted to mask his weakness with words.
Stay out of the dark. Stay away from deserted places.
Whether it was for some deeper reason or perhaps The fact that he looked so helpless. Everybody he had met in his life seemed to warn him with those words.
Did knowing that ever help anyone?
What did that even mean, stay out of the dark? Nowhere in the city was without light. Everywhere from the bustling train station to the remote residential areas was illuminated by artificial light, not least the main roads. Scary was scary, but this kind of fear was of a different sort than what he'd felt in the mountains. The most likely source of his fear was the fact that this place was governed by starkly different rules. The way in which the city meted out justice was terribly imbalanced. And to the provisional Sojiro, his lack of familiarity with the laws of the land terrified him far more than the dark.
That word's pronounced provincial, by the way. You were saying
Which one?
Provincial, not provisional.
Oops. In the mountains, retribution came swiftly to those who broke the rules. Take a game trail, for example. Those who unwittingly trespassed on the animal kingdom's domain would, as a matter of course, be savaged by the native wildlife. Accordingly, in Sojiro's mind, an offender paid the price for one's mistakes immediately. It was not a matter of who punished whom, it was simply that one who broke the rules would be instant, tangible retribution. He felt that in this regard, the laws of the city were far too ambiguous. One could meet their demise without ever knowing whether one was in the right or wrong.
Well, I guess it's probably not that different when it comes down to it.
To put it simply, retribution was delayed. To take the analogy a step further, back home in his village, no one individual had been given the responsibility of maintaining order. In the city, however, someone was put in charge of punishing lawbreakers on behalf of the kind-hearted citizens who lived there. While crime and punishment in the mountains were synonymous, in the city, the two were separated, and an unrelated person brought judgment after the crime had been committed. Entering places that must not be entered, seeing things that must not be seen. Breaking a law had consequences. Someone would come to exact justice for the law that was broken. The result of all this was that the safest way to survive the city was not to stick your nose in the affair of others. When the people who cared about Sojiro told him to stay away, they probably meant, if you don't, nobody will be able to help you.
Oh crap, I almost took another shortcut.
No matter how much of a nuisance these obstacles were, one could not just climb over a neighbor's fence, even when one's apartment was just on the other side. If the people inside happened to be awake and called the police, nobody would lift a hand to help him. With his misguided view of the city, Sojiro once again ended his day in peace. Unable to fall asleep right away, he gazed out of his window upon the night sky from the floor of his apartment. The cityscape had caused him to tremble in fear when he first moved here. The convenience of solving almost any problem with the flip of a switch. The novelty of living a wall away from a complete stranger. It all disappeared into the night sky when he looked up.
Is this really the same sky?
Unconsciously, he recalled his own words.
What dim stars? What a cramped sky.
Here, there were no starry nights. Could he even survive here? The same misgivings since his first night continued to haunt him. His eyelids fell shut. Although he was fraught with worry, Sojiro's body felt the fatigue from his work and studies and thus, he fell fast asleep.
All right. Well, we're coming up on the 4 hour mark, so I guess we can end it there for today.
Shiki had no job. Emiya had like one,
Yep.
and this guy, he has who knows how many.
Yeah.
He works everywhere.
Yep. All right. So, yep, I guess that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm really excited to come back to this again. I honestly did not think we were going to get to this year because I already read it at the beginning of the year and thought, yeah, I'm not in the mood to read it again. But it's been long enough, and now that we have the full context of the entire Type Moon lore, it's interesting coming back to it again. So we'll be back on tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So see you then.